In this video, I show you how I made the chest armor for my Skyrim glass armor set. To start off the process of making the pattern for the chest plate, I wrapped my torso in plastic wrap. Then I took strips of duct tape and put them over top of the plastic wrap, concentrating on one side since I'd be making this symmetrical. It helps if you have somebody to get your back. Then I carefully cut myself out, after which I realized it would be easier to draw the shapes on while wearing it. Then I put it on my table and traced over and sort of cleaned up my lines a bit. To get the shape for the boob cup, I paper machéed the inside of a salsa bowl. This salsa bowl is quite useful in the process of pattern making. After it had dried, I took it out and drew on the design for the boob cup. Then I trimmed the edges, went over the lines with marker, and cut out the different sections. To get the decorative section patterns to lay flat, I cut slits to make darts. Then I traced the base shape for the front of the chest piece onto wrapping paper and repeated for the back. Ignore the shapes on the front pattern, I later decided to redraw those details. Then I started sketching out the designs that would go on the back of the chest plate. I realized it should probably have the same base shape as the front, so I cut out the front pattern and placed it over the back and traced that shape to give it a new shape. I kept pictures of the armor taken in game off to the side on my phone to reference while sketching the pattern details. Then I traced over that in marker. To get the base shape for the boob cup, I used aluminum foil covered in duct tape on the inside of the salsa bowl. I used the handle of a pair of scissors to get the pieces to lay flat. Then I pinned down the pattern for the front of the chest plate to foam, traced around it, flipped it over, joining at the open middle part, and traced around it again to get the full shape. I repeated this process for the back. After cutting that out, I heated up the sides and straps with a heat gun and formed them into a bit of a curve. Tracing down the middle with a marker, I then cut down this line at about a 45-degree angle, turned it around and repeated, then pulled out the foam from these cuts to create a trench. I accidentally cut through part of it, but I'd cover that up later anyway, so it was fine. And it gave it this bend. Then I cut out the holes for the boob cups. Speaking of the boob cups, I transferred my aluminum foil duct tape pattern pieces to paper so I could clean up the shapes. Then I cut them out and transferred them to foam. I made 2 of each of these shapes for each boob cup, so each boob cup was composed of 4 pieces. After that, I went ahead and pre-formed them using my heat gun. You can't see because the table is in the way, but I used my knee as a sort of rounded anvil to help get the curved shape. I picked this up from an Evil Ted video. Then I noticed the trench needed to be a little deeper, so I cut more of the material out. Then it had a better bend. Using the shape of the actual front chest plate, I traced that so I could re-sketch the details to fit correctly. See, the salsa bowl is versatile. I can use the main part to get curves and the handles to get the sort of rounded rectangle shape while drawing. I find it helps to turn the page to get certain curves when drawing. Then it was time to start gluing things together, starting with the bend for the chest front and the boob cups. After the contact cement had dried for a few minutes, I pressed the crease in the chest plate together and then pressed the edges of the boob cup pieces together. So I joined two together, then the third panel to that, and finally the fourth panel to create one finished boob cup shape. Then where the boob cups were going to go, I smoothed out the edges of those holes so it would have a little bit of a nicer transition. I started with a rotary tool and then continued smoothing it out with a sanding sponge. Afterwards, I spread contact cement on the inside of the chest plate around the edges of the holes, pressed one of the cups into that area to leave some of the adhesive residue on the cup to see where I needed to put the adhesive on the cup shape. Then I repeated this for the second one. After they had had time to set, I just pressed those in place, mashing down all the edges. Then I trimmed up my front and back chest pieces a bit to get them to match up a little better and to be a little cleaner. I cut this weird little part off my pattern for the back as well as on the actual piece, matching up the shape of the bottom for both front and back. The straps were a little too wide, so I thinned them out while I was doing this. And then I realized that I needed a wedge shape inserted for my straps to sit at the right angle and be the correct length, so I went ahead and made that shape and cut it out of foam. Then I needed to get the kind of bend in the back piece, so I put a line down the middle and then just cut straight down the line, making sure not to cut all the way through the thickness of the foam. After cutting it, I bent it to test it, because you can always cut it a little deeper, but you can't really uncut it. When I had the bend I wanted, I took it outside and put contact cement in the crease. To get it to stay in the sort of open position, I wedged a strip of foam in the crease, helping the back keep the bent shape. Then I put contact cement onto the ends of the straps to add the wedge of foam I cut out earlier. And, of course, added it to one edge of the wedge as well. Once the contact cement set up for a few minutes, I joined the wedge to the strap and then added adhesive to the other edge. After everything was dried, I cut away the excess foam sticking out on the inside of the back. And after a test fit, I realized my head didn't really fit through the top, so I cut away material to open up the hole in the neck area where the straps are. I also had to cut away some under the arms so I could comfortably put my arms down while wearing it. There was a lot of trial and error, but this was my first foam armor build. Then I began sketching out the shape for the piece that goes on the upper back. You may be able to sort of see the reference on my phone off to the side here. Taking just the top and bottom sections of the paper mache boob cup pieces I had made earlier, I transferred them to really thin craft foam and cut them out, including the darts I had made in them. Back to the top piece for the back, I decided I needed to cut the bottom edge at about a 45-degree angle to create a bevel. I then smoothed out the edges using a sanding sponge. Then I took a heat gun to get rid of all those fuzzy bits on the edges. For this piece, I decided to just draw all the details directly onto the foam instead of making a paper pattern first. Then I did a little more cleanup on the edges of the chest piece and started rounding over the edges using a sanding sponge and hit it with a heat gun. I cut out the pattern for the chest piece decorative pieces and made sure they fit before transferring them to foam. I traced half, then flipped it over to trace it again and make one symmetrical piece. Then I just went ahead and marked the pieces that would need cut out with little X's. And then got to cutting the pieces out to be hollow on the main decorative piece. Once again, I took a sanding sponge to round over the edges, also using a nail file. I did this for all of the edges of the decorative piece, inner and outer. And then hit that with the heat gun. While I was at it, I went ahead and heated up the boob cup decorations. Then, like I did on the main chest piece front, I cut a trench on the inside of the decorative piece to match. Afterwards, I went ahead and closed it up like I did with the main chest piece front, so it would have that same bend before I joined them together. And I also went ahead and closed up the darts on the boob cup decorations as well. Then I took the chest piece, placed where the boob cup decorations would go, and traced them with a marker so I would know where to put my adhesive. I did the same thing for the chest plate decoration. Then I added the contact cement to the chest plate and smoothed it out with some scrap foam. And then I added it to the inside of the decorative pieces as well. After it had some time to get tacky, I pushed the pieces down in one spot and slowly smoothed them into place, working my way across the area carefully. For the main chest piece decoration, I actually added contact cement as I went along. So I started at the top, added contact cement, got that pressed down, and then added contact cement to the main chest piece and decoration and continued doing this until I got to the bottom and outer edges. Because once you get the pieces joined with contact cement, they are joined. Then I smoothed out the edges of the boob cup decoration sections since it was hard to do that before attaching them. I also smoothed out a few more areas while I was at it. Then I took part of my back decoration pattern and used a blade, lightly cutting the lines to mark where I would burn the details in later. I also transferred some of the more 3D back pieces onto the same thickness of foam I did for the front decorative piece and cut those out. Then I rounded them over with a sanding sponge. For this main piece, to get one of the edges rounded over, it helped to have it elevated, so I just sat it on top of a second sanding sponge. Then I hit those with a heat gun to get rid of all the fuzzy bits and seal the foam. I took it outside again and traced over the areas I marked with the wood burning tool to add a little more detail to those pieces. Then I used contact cement to add the bigger piece onto the top of the back. And the second sort of bigger piece as well. I actually put the contact cement on this piece and pressed it onto the back to leave an impression of where I needed to put the contact cement on the chest piece itself. Once they gotten tacky, I pressed them together. It takes about 5 minutes to get to this state, by the way. To get the right placement for pieces like this, it honestly is really helpful to put contact cement onto the piece you're going to place and then press it down to leave an impression of where to put the adhesive to match up. Then I finished up burning the details on the back to match up and started burning the details onto the front. This, of course, included the designs on the boob cups. Then I flipped over to the back and added more details. Then I could start working on attachments, so I measured out the length of Velcro I needed, cut that, and then made a little platform from foam so I could attach the sides together. I heated up the sides of the back to help match the curve of the sides for the front. I also reshaped the front a little bit. Then I took the loop part of the Velcro, peeled back the plastic from the adhesive a little bit, pushed it down to the inside of the edge of the front chest plate, and pressed it down as I peeled off the backing. I put hot glue on my little foam piece I cut out and pressed it onto the joining side on the back chest piece. Then I reinforced this with more hot glue and added the hook part of the Velcro to this strip. At that point, it became apparent that I should have added a little more to the foam to account for overlap. So I just pressed a little more foam against the adhesive of the Velcro strip, cut away the excess, and reinforced this new seam with some hot glue. Then the pieces could join up at the sides. The loop part got pulled off a bit while testing this out, so I reinforced the edges of the strip with hot glue. I needed to cut a little bit of decoration for the overlap on one of the sides, so I freehanded the necessary shapes onto some super thin craft foam and hot glued it into place. After doing another test fit, I found that to get in and out of the chest plate, I also needed one of the straps to open as well. So I made a cut in one of the straps and cut a little piece of foam to add like I did for the sides. This time though, I kept that overlap in mind. I added a little extra space on, placed hot glue in that area, and added it to the underneath of the strap. I placed the hook part of the Velcro onto this platform and placed the loop part on top and peeled off the backing. And then I just pushed the strap onto this, so I had the two joining pieces for the strap. Then I applied Plasti Dip to it, and the application was not great. There was a lot of texture to it. To try to fix this, I added acrylic gel medium to the rough areas, let it dry, and then sanded it smooth. I did this for all the textured areas, both front and back. Then I marked where my neck piece would join and went ahead and added a Velcro square to that area. Then I could finally begin painting. For everything that would be gold, I started with a base of brown, and once it had dried, added a second layer. After the second layer of brown was dry, I began adding gold paint. For smaller areas, I used a smaller brush to apply the paint to get a smoother application. I also used this brush for crevices and edges as well. And then for larger areas, I went back to my larger brush. When the paint got a little low, I used pliers to help squeeze paint out of my metal tube. To add some tarnishing to this, I took a smaller brush with some copper paint and pushed it into the crevices and edges. Here's a comparison of with and without this tarnishing. You can see it really helps add dimension. For the teal areas, I went in with a small brush with darker teal and added paint to all of the crevices first. Then with a bright teal, I brushed over the surface of these areas. Since I already had the gold applied, I used a small flat brush and took my time applying the paint, carefully kind of wiggling my brush at the edges. Then I took the incandescent green and went over the teal surfaces, which gave it this really pretty shimmery sort of look. So here you can see with and without that incandescent green. So pretty. Then I took that same incandescent green color and made highlights on some of the edges, as well as moving the brush quickly back and forth for more streaky or scratch-like marks. And you can't quite see here, but I added resin over top of all of the teal areas in the same manner I did for my helmet. Here's the finished chest piece. I added magnets on the inside back later to attach my weapon set. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to my channel. If you have any questions about my first foam armor build, feel free to ask me in the comments below. I've created a playlist for my glass armor build worklogs and have linked it on screen as well as in the description box below. Thanks again and have a great day.